So I'm going to tell you a little bit about me, and then how this talk will run. I'm going to talk about 3 particular areas, and then I'm going to offer you some very practical things that work for me, and they might work for you. There's no guarantee, but I would like to offer you what works for me, and also have any questions that you would like to ask. And we might try a little guided meditation as part of it, but you don't have to do that if you don't want to. So first of all, about me, I think I'm one of those people that is a sort of compulsive writer. I think I've written all my life, and probably started in quite early childhood to be writing poems and plays and songs. And I've written about 25 published books, and I'm a screenwriter as well, and I've written radio plays, and I was a journalist for 25 years. I've been the books chair of the books committee of the Guild for the last 7 years, and we've just had the book awards. So I've had a lot of experience as a jobbing journalist, which is, you know, here is a deadline now, meet it, whether you like it or not. And I've had a lot of experiences writing books to usually impossible deadlines. And I actually can write a book in a month, and I've written several books in a month, which have been commercial books. But I am able to do that because I've discovered over years, I've developed a kind of method as to how to do that. And that's what I'm actually going to share with you, some of my stress busting methods. I love writing. It's almost like having an affair with myself. I absolutely love it. I love that feeling of settling down to a project. And I think when I wrote my first book, which was back in 1992, I remember it went to a publisher. I got an agent, and she took it to a publisher, and I had a meeting with the publisher, and I had 200 post-it notes on this manuscript, and I cried my eyes out, and I went home and I put the manuscript in the dustbin, and I wrote the book again from scratch. And it took me nearly a year to write that book. So one of the things I've learned myself, and obviously you're going to be writers of all different kinds, is that with practice, with sticking at it, with time, the process can get easier. Not always, but it can. So I'd like to tell you about sort of 3 particular things. The first thing is about stress busting. This is like the big picture. When we are writers in the world, as I was sort of joking at the beginning, you know, there's all this distraction all the time. There's all this permanent feed of news, bad news, obviously, at the moment. There's so much going on in our lives. We might be physically unwell. There might be all sorts of things that we have to deal with. And the real issue for writers is to learn to focus. Now, always think that we are like racehorses that have to put the blinkers on, and you have to find what your own particular blinkers are. So in other words, you have to find your method for you that works, that helps you really focus. There's a new book that's come out called Stolen Focus by Johan Hari, which some of you might have come across. It's a very, very interesting book, which I've just read, which is about neuropsychology to some extent. But it's really saying how in the modern world, we're in a sort of an attention deficit world now, where it's very, very difficult to pay attention for very long without interruption, checking our phones, checking the news, getting distracted. We all know that our attention spans have got shorter and shorter and shorter. If you're going to be a writer, you have to primarily understand yourself. What really makes you tick as a writer? And as a writer, you have to value yourself enough that you give to yourself what you need in order to write. So, for instance, the French writer Rousseau had to have the smell of rotting apples in a drawer in order to write. Some people have music on. My daughter is a playwright, and she has on film music, especially the good, the bad, and the ugly, for some reason. Some people have to have silence. Some people have to have noise. Some people have to wear no underpants. You know, some people have to be sitting looking at a view. Other people have to wear a hat, you know, your writing hat, and a bit like Gryffindor, I suppose. But you've got to know what works for you. I like writing at night. I have a real passion for my writing time. So you have to understand your biorhythms. Are you a lark, an early morning person? Are you an owl, a late night person? Well, I'm an owl. And there's something about the velvety darkness of the night that gets me going. And I have a great writing window between 10 and 2 in the morning. And sometimes, you know, the afternoon, but know what works for you. Part of being a writer and stress busting as a writer is really thinking, well, what do I need to do this task? What really works for me? Is it that I'm going to eat something before, or does eating make me tired? Or do I need coffee? Or do I need water? Or do I need a walk? So understanding yourself, understanding what really works for you, setting the scene, defining your task, and maximizing your ability to focus is really a place to start. And that begins to reduce stress. Faye Weldon, the writer, wrote all her books with children running about, a bit like Jane Austen, and all her chapters in her books are very, very short. I met her once and she said, I had about half an hour before the school run and before doing dinner and bath time, and that's when I wrote my books. And I think I've been a working mother. My daughter is now 25, but I wrote books all the way through her babyhood and childhood. And indeed, my day was modeled around her day. So I would write before I picked her up, and then after bedtime and tea time, I would go back to work. And I think lots of women, we do not only the second shift, but the third shift, you know, knowing your optimum time. Some people, you know, John Fowles used to get up at 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning. Some men have wives that bring them tea and toast. Some wives have other wives that bring them fruit in a basket, you know, but get what you need and make sure you set the scene. And then you can clear the deck. You can begin to reduce stress by saying, this is what I need. I have to wear a scarf. I've got to keep the cats on the desk. I've got to close the door. I'm going to wear earplugs, you know, whatever it is. Then the second part is knowing your process as a writer. And when I first started writing, I wrote a novel for a competition, and I did actually finish it. It nearly finished me, but I finished it. And I did get a little prize for this. And what I learned was, I think when you start as a writer, you have a romantic notion that you're going to sit with your quill and your ink and dip it in, and you're going to write this fantastic book. What I learned was that writing is really editing. And you cannot, you know, some people write 1 paragraph a day. Other people will write 1 paragraph a week. Some people write 10,000 words a day. But knowing your process, knowing really how you do things and maximizing that to the best of your ability. I used to teach writing at City Lit, and I used to taught writing a lot to people on sort of writing courses. You know, some people have to be locked in a room. Other people walk about dictating it on a dictaphone. Know what your process is. Don't compare yourself to other people, especially if you've got friends who find it very easy and churn out writing. It might be a load of rubbish that they're churning out, you know, and your 1 paragraph might be absolute gold dust. So don't always compare yourself. And I say compare is despair. Just put those blinkers on, keep focused on your task. And, you know, if you're writing a book or writing a screenplay, writing anything, set your course, know what it is you're trying to do, work out who you're doing it for. And if you have a deadline, you know, all of us with deadlines, we always leave it too late. We're always scrabbling at the last minute. We always feel like there's not enough time. And it's just the process. I've come to understand that if my back isn't against the wall, I don't write anything good anyway. So this brings me on to self-talk and how we, this is a third part now, how we talk to ourselves as writers. I absolutely want to ban negative self-talk. So compare is despair. Don't compare yourself with your friend, the person who wrote this wonderful thing on the internet that sold 5 million copies. It doesn't matter what anybody else does. All that matters is what you do. What matters is that you like what you write and that you're editing it and that you're engaged with it, because in fact, your passion, your excitement will transmit. If you're constantly mimicking somebody else or trying to be somebody else, it's not going to work and you will stress. So you have to like yourself and you have to like what you're writing. In fact, I always cry at the end of my own books. When I write my last paragraph, I've ghostwritten several people's life stories and I'm sobbing at the end, you know. So do keep some tissues by the desk. And it's really important to like what you're doing, to have passion for it, to love it. At the same time, it's absolutely essential to kill your babies. You have to get your proverbial blue or red pen out and get rid of things. So if you're writing characters and you know that thing, if you're writing a novel or a screenplay and you absolutely love that bit, that scene, that beat, that character, you cannot get rid of it. You'll die rather than get rid of it. That's often the thing that has to go. And you just have to keep a file of outtakes and say, right, I'll come back to that later. So you have to learn that you will maximize your output, maximize your focus, maximize your ability to write and not be so stressful. If you are eliminating negative self-talk, you kill your babies. In other words, you get rid of the bits that really don't work. Don't stress over it. Take it out, put it somewhere else. You come back some other time. And you understand your process. You understand that when you've had an hour at a computer, that's enough. Or you need to nap. If you're tired, you nap. Or you leave it till later and you come back. And don't get into, I see so many people get into a kind of barbed wire thicket of, oh, but I must do it this way, and get out the old baseball bat and start beating ourselves up with, I should have done this, I ought to do that, I'm not as good as so-and-so. This is actually the stuff of stress. This is actually the stuff that we do to ourselves as writers that doesn't do us any good at all. The other thing is try and write in a hangover-free zone, that if you're partial to a few bevs the night before the lunchtime, you think a nip or two will get you onto that paragraph or whatever. I honestly think it's an illusion. Some people think, you know, I'll have a spliff and then I'll write this wonderful psychedelic something or other. On the whole, it's drivel and dross, and all you do is dribble all over the keyboard. So the best thing is to keep a clear head. Keep your head as clear as you possibly can keep it. If you're going to have a writing day, clear the decks, close the door, turn off the phone and be there, meditate. Just use mindfulness. I've written a book on mindfulness called the Mindfulness Journal. I've written a book called the Anxiety Journal. And both of these books, and I've written some books in lockdown on confidence and peace and sleep. You need to get enough sleep. If you're tired, take a nap. Put your timer on for 10 minutes. Take a nap. You don't need to tell anybody. You can just do it. A lot of writers get very stressed about getting stuck. And we all get stuck at that plot point or that bit that we can't finish, or I haven't got the order right. You know, I often really struggle about the order in books, or if you have a character you don't like, but you can't get rid of them. So getting unstuck quite often, instead of hunching over the keyboard and sweating blood clots and commas and full stops, go away from the keyboard, go and do something else. And one of the stress busting things I will do is go and clean something, or empty the cat litter, or go take a pair of secateurs and cut down something, or run round the block, or just sit, you know, go and have a shower and sing, or something, do something else, and then come back to it. You need to be unstuck. The worst thing to do is to really just sit there staring at the screen. What I find is if I'm cutting down a bush or digging something, suddenly a light bulb goes on, because there's a loosening up, and there's a kind of readjusting of the deck chairs on the Titanic as it sinks. So you need to find your method, your process. You need to eliminate the negative self-talk, and you need to know when to stop, because a lot of us carry on writing and overwriting, and then we go back and we fiddle with it again, and then we think, oh no, I don't like this bit, I don't like that bit. And we make the whole process into a miserable struggle. And personally, I think it really shows if you've really enjoyed yourself writing something, you've really been there, you've been focused. I know that when I'm really in the process, I don't look at the keyboard, I don't look at the screen, I'm actually looking over the screen, and I'm just in my head writing like that because I'm in it. And if that is the sweet spot, that is when you're in flow. And for most writers on a sort of neuropsychological level, if you hit flow, you're really in it. It's a bit like doing Tai Chi or any sort of yoga, that when you're in a movement or a dance and it's really going, and it's like playing music, when you really know it's humming, you're there. And that is a wonderful thing for a writer. And then you don't need to stress, because you can trust that what you're creating is going to be probably all right. The other thing is about leaving your work. I've developed a method with writing books, and I get lots of bits of paper, I plan out all the chapters, I read all the research, say, for the next chapter, and then I meditate. And I've meditated for about 25 years. I do a very, very, very simple meditation, which is simply focused on breathing. It's good old fashioned meditation, but literally, as I breathe in, I think rising, and as I breathe out, I think falling. And I do that for 20 minutes at the start of the day. But if I'm writing a book, I will look at the next chapter. Say I've got all my chapters, 25 chapters laid out for a book. I look at chapter 1, I think, okay, here's the interviews, here's the research, here's this, here's that. And instead of going towards the screen and the chair and the desk and kind of hunching over it and going, oh, where do I start? Where do, you know, oh, what do I do? I actually go away, I sit in a big beanbag and I meditate. So I read all the research, read the interviews, and I meditate. And I completely blank out. And what always happens, and this has happened to me many, many times, is the first line comes up. By 20 minutes, I've got the first line, and I kind of drift over to the keyboard, sit down, and I write down the first line, and literally the chapter writes itself. Honestly, this is how I write. And so I can write a book, I can write 10,000 words a day easily that way. And I can write a book, a commercial. I've written lots of biographies where I have to sort of write the book to a tight deadline. The key thing is not to worry about the deadline or worry about whether you can do it. It's just to get your head into a place where you can do it. So you take away, in psychological terms, the superego, the headmistress, headmaster that tells you off. You put them in a jam jar and you put the lid on. You take away the conscious mind that's telling you you're not going to be any good, you're not as good as your friend Dorothy, you wish you were 10 foot tall and had blonde hair and then you'd be a great writer. And you take away all those conscious thought processes and you access through meditation your subconscious mind that's doing this whirring behind the scenes. And if you can calm down your mind, the alpha waves in your mind will calm down through a meditative process or a mindfulness process of focusing on your breathing. By doing that, you free up your creativity and you free up your ability to really concentrate. So I use meditation or mindfulness. I've written this little book called The Mindfulness Journal. I free up my ability to create all the time. So if I'm going on radio, I do lots of radio. I never engage with people in the green room because it's very stressful, because they want to have the argument with me before I go on air. I just say, I'm just going to sit there with my eyes closed and I just go inside and I'm with me, I meditate. The same as if I'm going on TV. I do lots of BBC Breakfast. I used to be on Big Brother. I was on Women's Hour for 6 years. I don't get involved in the debate or the argument. I just simply get very centered and focused. And I meditate. I go to the loo. I go and sit on the loo and meditate for 2 minutes. And then I come out and I just go for it. And I use this method the whole time. And you can use this kind of mindfulness meditation all day. You're in a queue at a bus stop. You're in a queue in the post office. You're getting wound up. You're in a traffic jam. You can just calm your mind down and then you can just focus when you're really sort of at the moment. And the same thing is for writing, that if you go away from the keyboard and focus, when you come back, you can just do the job. And, you know, I've often met deadlines that way. You know, the Independents phoned up at lunchtime, said, can you do a piece by 3 o'clock? So I have a choice then. I either say, oh my God, how am I going to do it? Oh, I don't know. Oh, who am I to write it? Blah, blah, blah. Or I can say, okay, what's involved in this job? What do I need to know? Research this, research that, read this, structure it, and then meditate. And in the meditation, I can do it. And it gives you some sort of sense, or gives me some kind of sense of ability, groundedness, focus. And anxiety is, you know, a necessary part of us as human beings. We're all anxious. We need to be anxious because it's part of our fight, flight, freeze mechanism to survive. The problem with us is that anxiety, when it becomes overwhelming, becomes something that stops us doing something effectively. So you have to harness your anxiety as rocket fuel, really, as petrol, as diesel, to drive the engine, but not let it burn you out and not let it distract you and not let it overwhelm you and take over the process. So a certain level of wired upness is needed, but not too much. And if you can recognize who you are as a person, how you work as a person, what really gets you going, what will get in the way, and you maximize your potential for writing, you have to kind of shut down, as we said right at the beginning of this, the outside distractions. So turn off your phone, turn off things, maximize your comfort, the warmth of the room, the sort of chair you've got, and then focus your mind, and then turn off the negative self-talk and make sure that you can really focus on the task in hand. And I think as a writer, you will get more satisfaction. The last thing to say is then when you reread your work and you go back to it with a friendly disposition. Sometimes leave it overnight, leave it a week, come back to it later after you've done something else, and you might be nicely surprised. You might think, gosh, did I write that? Oh, that's quite good. And sometimes writers do that. You go, oh, I quite like that. And then sometimes you look at it and you think, oh my God, what a load of toss. And you just throw it away. But, you know, develop a friendly relationship with your writing and with yourself as a writer. And then the last thing to say is pat on the back time. You know, writers can be very, very self-punitive. Writers can be very scathing, can be very exacting. And I think it's an absolutely magical thing that anybody writes anything, you know, from a scratchy parchment of monks to now, you know, the fact that we managed to do it, it's part of a wonderful process of being a human being, and we're constantly evolving, and it's a wonderful form of communication. And, you know, your thinking is your writing, your life is your writing, you know, your thoughts are your writing, you are your writing. So if you treat your writing and whatever it is you produce with honor and with kindness and yourself in the process, you will reduce your stress, because instead of using a whip to get yourself to write things, you use a nice feather and a tickling stick or something furry, or a nice pussycat or something, and a reward at the end of it. So I always have flowers on my desk. I have 2 pussycats that come and visit, who are my muse. And, you know, give yourself a treat at the end of it and say, well done. So that's my thoughts on stress busting so far. And I'm very happy to answer any questions.
Yes, I've just invited everybody to add any comments that they have or questions that they might have for you. I mean, I find it very illuminating in terms of what you talked about, knowing your writing practice, knowing yourself, knowing how you tick, and not comparing yourself with other people. Though having heard how you work, churning out 10,000 words a day, I do feel a little intimidated.
Don't compare. You know,
don't compare.
Your 10 words or 100 words may be gold dust. My 100, my 10,000 may be a load of bollocks. But, you know, the key thing is to give yourself the gift of producing what you need to do and meeting your deadlines, and to actually write something that you're proud of. If we compare ourselves, there is no end to the madness that creates, because you can, you know, compare yourself on any level will just drive you off a cliff, really, Thelma and Louise wise. So the best thing is to really be you, write your way, write with a quill and, you know, blood if you need to, but just do it your way.
Yes, yeah. I also particularly appreciated your suggestion about having that self-knowledge of yourself, realizing when you hit those blocks that you need to get away, and sometimes doing things which are totally unrelated that might give you a sense of achievement in themselves, putting the next wash on, hanging up the wash. It's you know, I find that really useful, and so much common sense, and yet when we're all stuck nose to the screen, we miss it all. I think we've got a few questions coming in.
I was going to say, the only time the windows ever get cleaned in my house is when I'm getting ready to write a book. I'm suddenly, the week before, I'm tidying up. I tidy drawers, I tidy cupboards, I clean the windows, and it's all preparation, because I'm ordering my mind, and it gives me some sort of feeling of power over a chaotic situation. And I think when you're writing something, you're in chaos, because basically you start from blank and you're going to create something. And I sometimes, I have a method where I have a file tray that's empty, and every time I write a chapter, the next one goes in, and then by the end of the process, there is 300 pages of writing. And I think, yes, but, you know, but I got clean windows into the process.
No, I can identify with that. I do a lot of ironing. That seems to sort things out in my head. I'm going to ask some questions though. Adam Peck has asked, Corinne, how do you cope when you can't clear the decks, when you're continually finding other things to do to avoid starting to write?
Well, that's brilliant. That's procrastination central. There's a very good book, I think, called The Procrastination Code or something, Pearson's book. Procrastination is just fear. So you have to write down your list of things that you've got to do before you start. Usually it's a lot of rubbish, and usually it's just all distraction. And then prioritize. And the best thing to say, what I do this every day. I make my list. I make a list before sleep, because I wrote in lockdown, I wrote these 3 little books. One on confidence, 2 minutes to confidence, 2 minutes to sleep, and 2 minutes to peace. And the sleep one was interesting because there's a lot of research that if you write down everything that's in the way on your mind the night before you go to sleep, you put it onto a big piece of paper, just crumple up the piece of paper, put it on the floor, you'll sleep better. But the same thing is if you're about to start writing, you know, put out there on a list, on a file somewhere, just write down all those things that are getting in the way, and then prioritize doing your writing and give yourself a time limit. Say, I'm going to write 15 minutes now, and I'm just going to start. And you have to go and put yourself in a room and do it, or sit on your phone and do it, wherever you do it. But you'll feel so much better about yourself if you do it, because then there's no more excuses and you will have done it. And then you can go back to all the other rubbish. But try not to keep flicking to look at the news, flicking to look at pop-ups, flicking to look at your phone. Just say, sod it, I'm not going to look at my phone for the next half an hour, and I'm going to write this thing. And talk nicely to yourself, you know, be good to yourself. Give yourself some chocolate at the end of it, or a choc drop, or something, you know, some reward. A great one for rewards.
Absolutely. John Haig has asked, as a new writer without commissions yet, writing for spec, I don't have the discipline of external deadlines. How do I address this?
You make your own structure. You can make your own deadline. You say, what is it I want to write? This is such a good question, because I used to teach writing at City Lit, and you know, people would come along, they wanted to write a play or a film or a novel or a report, but you can actually define it for yourself. I want to write this thing. I want to write my life story. I want to write a journal. I want to write a comedy. Give yourself a structure, write down what it is you want to do, and then give yourself a deadline and say, if I've done this by Friday, I'm allowed to go out to the pub and have some nice food or drinks with a friend, but I can't go and see that film or watch that thing until I've done it. And sort of be nice to yourself while you say that to yourself. But I give myself treats and rewards. Break down what you're going to do into bite-sized chunks. Because I always say to people, if you're going to eat an elephant, start with one toenail. You know, you just start at one corner of the elephant's foot and you eat one toenail, then you eat the next one. So big tasks. I want to write a novel. I want to write this. I want to write that. They're huge, great big things. So break it down, make a list. Where do you want to start? And then just begin with a very defined bit. If you write an introduction, it's never going to be the introduction, because you'll always change it. And it's like when you wrote essays as a teenager or at university, you always get rid of the introduction because it's always too long and waffly. Or you write articles, they always say, get rid of the introduction, get into the meat. But you need to write yourself into it. So allow yourself to write all the waffle to get into it, but at least start, just start, and then reward yourself. So break things down, bite-sized chunks, start, just do it.
I like that. Another one from Victor. When toxic realities are in your personal life, how do you best quickly switch off unresolved aggravations for serene writing sessions?
Oh, that's such a good question. I personally think you need to deal with the feelings that are underneath. I had some very bad news first thing this morning, that one of my friends had died yesterday, and it's out of the blue. So I did Pilates and cried my eyes out this morning, knowing that I was going to come and do this. So I know myself well enough to know if I have a good cry and I cuddle the cats I know I'll get back later and cry again. And then that means that now I can be here, and I'm here 100% in this moment with you guys. So there's always stuff going on in our lives. If you're feeling really distraught about something, you need to talk about it. You need to process some emotions. Then you can call a friend, just call somebody and talk to them. If you haven't got any friends, you can call the Samaritans 24 hours a day and they'll listen. You can write it out. I have files on my computer of downloads. When I'm ranting about something and I need to have a rant, I download to myself, I have a rant about something. And that helps me process my emotions. If you're angry, you can get a cushion, dig your fingers into it, roar into the cushion like a lion. You can bash a cushion. You can get a rolling pin and bash a cushion. If you're feeling griefy, you know, put on a soppy record or put on something that used to make you cry and let yourself have a good cry in 5-10 minutes. That's what I did this morning. I knew I needed to have a good cry so that I could be really present with you guys. And just learn, it's called emotional literacy. You learn about yourself, how your emotions work. You could listen to comedy for 10 minutes and watch Simon's Cat or anything just to make you laugh. You know, there's plenty of stuff on the internet that you can have a 5-minute laugh with. Give yourself what you need, because I really believe you deserve to meet your deadlines as writers, and you need to write what you need to write. And writing is such a therapeutic, such a brilliant thing to do. And it's such a necessary thing, necessary form of communication in the world. Because all of us, I mean, I grew up loving books because they were my friends and they were things that I could read on my own. And you can take a book anywhere. My father used to say to me, "You're never alone with a book. You know, you've always got your friend." And I've still got 4,000 books in my house, and ones that I go back to when I need a bit of succor and fun. So your writing is really important. And so getting yourself into a place where you can write is also important. The other thing to say is, it might be that if you're really upset about something, it's not the day to write. Maybe you need to go for a walk. Maybe you need to go to sleep. Maybe you start again tomorrow. Because emotionally, we do go through things, we do process. And you might feel very upset today, but once you've allowed yourself to cry or to deal with things, then maybe tomorrow you can feel a bit better and get going. So be forgiving of yourself. And if it's a bad day, it's a bad day.
Yeah. I want to read another comment to you. This is less a question, but I just felt it resonated, or would resonate with a lot of us. Corinne, your comment about anxiety, I realise is what overwhelms me, not the writing itself. I'm a terrible procrastinator, and it's that also that makes me anxious. It's like I have to have everything perfectly ready before I begin. Breathe, rising, falling. So I really, like Bernie, appreciated your very simple meditation.
Yes, I think that's a bit of perfectionism. This is a whole other beast for writers, that most of us who are quite anxious, I include myself in this, you know, I'm a very anxious person, and I've harnessed my anxiety in my life. That's why for me, meditation, mindfulness really works. It is rocket fuel. It is definitely the stuff that you can harness. And sometimes I notice that quite a lot of people get very perfectionist, and therefore the perfectionism gets in the way. It's a mild form of OCD, which is obsessive compulsive disorder, which I certainly suffer from, have always had it. And, you know, there's a whole spectrum on all these things. I know that I will get very pernickety about my writing, but there comes a point when it gets in the way. And so I think if you talk nicely to the perfectionist in you, and you give them a nice blank piece of paper and say, go away and scribble on that, you can free up the other part of you that then just has to bash out some words. That it's very important not to let the perfectionism take over, not to let the perfectionism become barbed wire, because it then just completely stymies your creative flow. And I think it's really important to say, you know what, it's good enough. There was a very wonderful psychologist back in, the 60s and 70s who worked a lot with children, and came Winnicott, and he coined this phrase about good enough parenting. And you can, not a perfect parent, but you're good enough. And I often say to people, you're good enough. You're a good enough writer. You're a good enough person. You're a good enough whatever. And if you're a good enough writer, you can just damn well write. You have the freedom to write. It's not going to be perfect. And all writing will be edited. You always need to edit your writing. It's never going to be as good as it possibly can be, but it's probably going to be good enough and do the job. And in the end, we can always rewrite, but in the end, we have to draw a line and say that's enough.
Yeah, indeed. I have another question from Eve, who's been very complimentary and thanking you really after months of writing despair for all this advice. But her question is, I'm guilty of endless re-editing, worrying it's not good enough. How can I stop doing this?
That's exactly the heart of the matter. Not good enough. Your writing is you. Your writing is you. So you're saying, I'm not good enough. And the truth is you are, because you're you and you're creating something. So you have to watch that one, because it is self-attack, really. You have to say, I will do 2 more edits and then that's it. And stop picking at it, because it's picking. You have to say, I'll do a couple of more edits and then put it away and come back to it later. And this is part of the negative self-talk. Not good enough really means you're thinking that about you, and you don't really deserve that at all. You deserve to think, actually, this is quite good. I've done my best. And you really do have to know when to stop with writing. I can keep going back thinking, oh, that last paragraph, that could be a bit more this or a bit more that. I did a MA in screenwriting at the London College of Communication, and it was a wonderful, wonderful course. And I wrote a film about a therapist that went bad, called Crossing the Line. And I probably wrote 26 versions of this screenplay. And in the end, I went back to the first one, which was actually better than the 25 other versions. And I think this is what we learn sometimes, that you can keep editing yourself into oblivion. And if you look back at what you did first time round, it was pretty damn good. So be careful. The other thing is, be careful who you show your work to, because sometimes we think, oh, I'll give it to a friend, or I give it to this person, or I pay a lot of money for a good script editor or for a good editor. And sometimes it can be helpful, but be careful who you give it to, and be aware of how you're going to deal with criticism and how it will land with you, and whether it will destroy you or not. If you have a malevolent criticizer, it can be very distressing and stressing. So be thoughtful about how you get feedback and who you get it from, and whether it's worthwhile and whether it's worth paying for. And also be aware of how you take criticism, what you take on. Don't let it destroy you. So this is about having a healthy boundary, healthy psychological boundary, where it comes in this far, but it doesn't go in completely and lacerate your heart.
Oh, that's very helpful. You've actually inadvertently answered Meryl's question, which was the next one. So I'm going to move on to Brandon's. He asks, any tips on how to handle having so many project ideas jumbled in your head and it negatively affecting the pace of the writing process?
I think that's a great question. I'm like that. I've always got more ideas. I'm one of those people that's bubbling with ideas all the time. And I just keep a list and I just write them on Post-its the whole time, because I think as you write, as you create, stuff pops up. But don't let them get in the way of the main task. Keep focus on your task. And this is where you have to back to the elephant. You have to break it down into bite-sized chunks. If you're writing something and you want to write the first scene, the first chapter, the first bit, then do it. Give yourself a deadline and a treat afterwards. You know, the sun's out today, thank goodness. I'm going to do this for half an hour, and then I'm going to have a cup of coffee, a piece of chocolate, a walk around the park, talk to my daffodils. You know, I'm going to do something that will reward me. And then all the other things that are popping up like mushrooms all the time, just jot them down and just say to yourself, I'll come back to that later. You can even keep an ideas envelope that you bung post-its into. I've got a kind of thing that's got little pegs on it, and I just peg all my ideas on this little tree. And then I've got all my ideas popping out like little tree of ideas, but I don't have to action them then. So keep focused, keep focused.
That's very helpful. I have to say, I love this idea, all these different metaphors and survival tips that we have. I have one which is, I say to my children when they're panicking over the sheer amount of revision to do, don't look up at the mountain, you'll get vertigo. Just chip away at that little rock in front of you. Let's see, what else have we got here?
That's a brilliant thing, actually, because if you do mountain climbing or you do any walking, you know how you look at the top of the mountain and then you do the foothills. When you get to the foothills, you look up and you think, God, I've got all that way to go yet. Well, writing a book is like that if I'm writing a book, I'll think, I'll just get this first chapter done. And then I think, I've got 24 chapters to do. Oh my God. But actually, the way to do it is to say, okay, I've done that first bit. That's good. Reward. Next bit tomorrow. So keep it small. Keep it doable. Get it done. Reward yourself. And I always, if I'm writing something, I start the next day reading what I did the day before, re-editing it, and then move on. You know, so always be moving on to the next bit.
Well, I think that's very helpful. Have we any other? Oh no, hang on. I think we've got another one from Zoe. She says, I've hit a wall in my third act as I've got so many various ideas written out about how I can get to the fourth act, but I don't know how to pick the best one and get overwhelmed. Do you have any tips for this kind of situation?
I've had this experience myself many times. Sometimes write the last act. Sometimes just hop over the thing that you're stuck on and move on to the last part. And the other thing is you can write out in an act, you know, you can do lots of different versions. This is the thing that I found I've written quite a few TV series and things, and I've found, you know, you can go down any alleyway, you know, you obviously can. And sometimes just try it on for size and see where it goes. And you'll trip over a character or a moment or a beat, and you'll think, no, I don't like that. Or actually, no, that works. So just allow yourself to experiment, do the writing, actually. But I think one of the things is that the anxiety can take over. So we get frozen, we get into a state of confusion and overwhelm. And I think when you get into that state, you're not going to do anything. That's the time to go for a walk, to move, to have a bath, to clear out a drawer, to get a nap, to do some ironing, to do something else, and then come back to it. And sometimes just drop it completely and come back 2 days later or a week later. And if it's not going to work, it's not going to work. But sometimes with a bit of time, it'll do itself, and a bit of meditation, it will do itself.
Right, that's very handy. Is that all the comments we've had from everyone? That's covered a lot of ground, I have to say. I'm fully anticipating that everyone's going to go away feeling very energized, and we might get some amazing submissions for next year's awards. I don't know if you all were here at the beginning, but we were discussing how we've just had our Guild Awards, and in fact, this is something I'll come back to at the end. Corinne, would you like to finish?
Yes,
with
I will. Thank you very much. One thing I was going to say is I'm actually co-chair of the Books Committee of the Writers Guild, and I've been doing this for about 7 years now. And it's an absolute delight as a member of the Guild to meet with other book writers, and we are working on all sorts of things to do with trying to increase the money that writers earn. So we've just written a book, a little booklet that will come out later this year on self-publishing, for instance, and because we know that's a minefield. And we look at PLR, public lending right, and we're trying to negotiate that every book that's loaned will earn more money for us as writers. And we are constantly sort of trying to improve, you know, make sure the libraries keep open, make sure that writers keep writing, because book writers can get very, very isolated and feel very alone. So there is a books committee at the Writers Guild, and if you're a member of the Writers Guild, I would love to hear from you, because I will be stepping down this summer, and we're looking for, I'm a co-chair with a lovely man called Nick Yap, who also wrote the history of the Writers Guild, called The Right Stuff, and he's an absolutely wonderful man who used to be a comedy writer. So I very much encourage anybody to get in touch with me. I'd love to hear from you personally if you'd like to join the committee. You have to be a member of the Guild to do that. But also we do run, for the last 4 years, we've had a First Best Novel Book Award. We've just had the wonderful red carpet event, which was organised by the staff of the Writers Guild, which was really the glitterati. And Sandy Toksvig is our chair, our president. And it was a wonderful celebration of writing right the way across all the different craft areas. And it was streamed this year, which has been something that's evolved through the Writers Guild going through the pandemic, which was wonderful. So again, I'll be stepping down, and I've been chair of the jury for the last 4 years. There is a jury, there's a method for how to choose books. And if anybody's interested in doing that who is a member of the Guild, again, please get in contact with me, and I'd love to hear from you.
Fantastic. I realised, though, I jumped the gun there, and I don't know if you want to sign off with your little meditation. Do you feel you have time for that?
I think
that'd be a nice thing to do.
Just to describe it to you, because I think the word meditation, I will describe it to you and you can do it with me if you like. But just to say, I work as a psychotherapist 3 days a week in central London, and see many, many people suffering from anxiety, and I've worked with a lot of creatives, and teaching them in the chair simple meditation is a really, really useful tool. And if you're going to write something, as I said at the beginning of this talk, go away from the screen, go away from the keyboard, go away from your desk and distraction. Find yourself a quiet spot and just sit for a moment. Put your feet squarely on the ground, put your hands on your thighs or on the arm of the chair, or just be comfortable. You can lie down and do it if you can't sit. You can just lie in a bed, or you could just sit somewhere comfortable. Turn off your phone, put your timer on, say, for 5 minutes. And then it doesn't matter what you hear around you. Right now, I can hear traffic down my road. I can hear noises of things. You bring your focus in to you. You bring it to here in the middle of your forehead, behind your eyes here. And then you focus on your belly, on your breathing. And you breathe in. As you breathe in, you think rising. And as you breathe out, you think falling. And as you breathe in, you think rising. And as you breathe out, you think falling. And you just focus on your breath. You continue to do this. You bring your attention in all the time to here, just behind your forehead. And as you hear distractions, a phone rings, a car goes by, a doorbell rings, you ignore them, you just ignore everything. And you focus more and more on your breathing, rising and falling. And that's all you have to do. That's it. You just do that. You don't move. If you have an itch, you don't scratch it. You just deepen your breathing and focus on your belly opening out a bit, feeling the chair is holding you, feeling your feet are on the floor, or if you're lying down, lie on your bed, and just breathe. And that's all you have to do. And then your timer goes off and you come back in the room, as they say. So that's that.
Lovely way to end. I was feeling very zen then. I hope everyone's enjoyed this. Please keep an eye out for our forthcoming sessions. Over the next couple of months, we hope to be interviewing all our Guild Award winners, or as many of them as are available. And there will be other discussion panels coming up as well. So really look forward to seeing some of these faces who've become a regular fixture. Thank you so much, Corinne.
Pleasure.
It was just immensely helpful. And I think what we all needed, particularly over the last 48 hours,